We have on the Sophisticulture podcast the amazing Sophia Yau-Weeks, and we are here to discuss your fantastic new album that, like I said, has gone triple platinum in my household, Misty Mountain. Thank you so much for being with us, Sophia.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to chat.
Okay, awesome. So I have a lot of nerdy questions, but I'm going to
Cool.
start with the kind of the professional ones. Okay, so this is a patient album. It is very sonically cohesive, which I'm so grateful and grateful for and excited by. Sonically, what was the process of putting together the sound? What were you inspired by? Do you have any specific influences that you were listening to at the time, or was it just the wind in the trees and you went, that has to be an album, and then it just kind of downloaded?
Yeah, I feel like I tried not to write with any sonic influences initially. A lot of it was just me writing with my acoustic guitar, and that's typically how I songwrite, at least right now. So it was kind of just like mumbling over my guitar, and all of my demos were just vocals and guitar for the most part, with like minor production on top. And then I kind of felt like the songs naturally grew once I decided I wanted them to be in an album. I had the intent to like have an album, but I wasn't writing specifically for the project, if that makes sense. Like I basically was just writing as much as I could, and then around the time when I was going to move back to California, I had a huge bundle of songs and then started to narrow them down in terms of like what I thought was cohesive and strong. And after that, I would say like some of the sonic influences, or at least what I was listening to at the time once I started producing it, were like Nick Drake, Adrian Lanker, singer-songwriters like that.
Amazing. And I know that you used to be, when you were much younger, a musician, and this is a return now to your artistry of the past. Was there anything that you decided, like mandates or boundaries that you put in place to ensure that your process was protected, not just like in sense of kind of how the world saw it or how you felt about pressure around it, but also from kind of, the ways artists feel about their own work too?
Yeah, well, I guess to start, like I grew up playing classical violin and it never really felt like a creative outlet. It was more just like a thing I was told to do and that I felt like I had to be good at. So I really didn't want to get caught up in being too perfectionistic around the outcome of the album, which is really hard when you
Yeah.
like, learn. I don't know, I have all these like learned behaviors and voices in my head about what's good, or like even the feeling of only being able to create something and share it if it's like good enough.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways I felt like even making an album was a rejection of that mentality, because I still oftentimes don't feel like I'm good enough to be making music or sharing it or what have you. So in some ways even just making it felt like a rejection of some of that I grew up with. And then I recorded to tape, which I think also forced me to embrace the singularity of each take and not get too bogged down in the minor details. As a kid, like if I had a recital and I like messed up a single note, I would like cry afterwards and like have like huge breakdowns. And looking back, I'm like, whoa, that was not a big deal, you
Yeah.
know? But at the
Yeah.
time, like it felt like the biggest thing in the world. And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm still working on that type of stuff in regards to performing. But yeah.
I have to say, it's such a stunning album, and I think I especially, this is going to sound a bit kind of cliche now that everyone's saying it in the age of AI, but those imperfections really are what the humanity clings to. And the texture, I think, of the album really stood out to me, that it had not just that it was recorded on tape, but also that there was something really beautiful about how you constructed melody with a lot of kind of, I want to say, I don't know what the technical term is, but I believe it's like vocal flips. There was a lot of
Mm.
like it provided this real sense of the organicness of the way you wrote, and the way your lyrics also interacted with that. I could just sit here and just start quoting lyric after lyric from the album. I won't do that. I may do that later.
I'm like, let's hear it.
I feel like I should because there's like, I mean, the big line for me, which of course is just like it caps off the entire album, which it resonated on more levels than just one, which was grief is a gift. It takes someone special to be missed like this. And that sense of a discussion about like it was such a like one might interpret Christine as a sad note to end on, but it felt like the final note of a euphoric rise at the end of the album. There was a very clear shape to me that went from kind of this introspective analysis of the self and of the more difficult aspects that you were exploring that then led into this kind of the euphoria of being, the euphoria of life and love is a garden, and spellbound being kind of this rise into, anyway, I'm fangirling, let me stop.
No, I appreciate hearing your perspective. It's nice to hear. Thank
Well,
you.
because I am totally besotted with this album. And so that let me ask the more technical questions now in terms of I have to do this because you and I were both COVID conscious, and so much also of how we met had also to do with that community. I wanted to just ask kind of brass tacks, kind of bolts and nuts and bolts kind of questions about the technical aspects of remaining COVID conscious while putting together an album like this. What were the precautions you took, not only kind of physically, but in terms of kind of how you felt artistically safe to do your best work while also remaining physically safe for your health?
Yeah, I was really lucky to work with a producer and musicians who were all down to be precautious. Which I was really nervous about, honestly. Once I kind of started to come to terms with like being COVID conscious and virus avoidant and that other people weren't on the same page, I kind of felt like I'm never going to be able to perform again. I'm never going to be able to make music. I had all of these narratives about what my future was going to look like. And then in approaching this album, I like created an access rider with like information about why I'm precautious, and what I needed to feel safe in the studio. So I brought some of my own air purifiers. I had lended air purifiers from a local clean air network in the Bay Area. I also did Plus Life testing on everyone every morning.
Beautiful. I've been there with my films as well. It's really puts your mind at ease.
Yeah, it was a game changer. And then also I just stayed masked unless I was like in the vocal booth, and I would, like run the air purifier before getting into the vocal booth, especially because I was recording at the start of the year, which is also just like
Yeah.
sick
Germ control.
season.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So all of those things allowed me to feel really at ease and safe. And yeah, I didn't get sick, which was awesome.
That is amazing. That's amazing. And I'm glad also that you found those collaborators because and I'll jump out of my journalism hat for a second as another artist trying to do this. It can be incredibly difficult even if you are really earnest and you put your heart out on the line, you go, listen, this is the situation. People can still have a real issue fully comprehending or even empathizing with that because of how much misinformation there has been around these safety precautions. And so to have a group of collaborators that understood, I no doubt has also really contributed to the quality of the album also, because not only do you know that you're in a safe space with collaborators in terms of your health, but also because they are able to comprehend that, they're able to comprehend you as an artist as well.
Totally.
Right? As a creative mind, you feel respected. So that's amazing. And I'm gonna have a think about that safety rider is a really genius idea. And you performed a gig for the album, a release party kind of gig, and that was also masked up. How did that go? I really wish you'd been there.
It went really well. I don't know if that venue had done any mask required shows before, maybe one, but they were super open to it and accommodating. I was able to provide masks at the door. I had a couple of lovely volunteers who helped enforce it. We had air purifiers. It was great. Yeah, it felt like such a difference from like a couple of years ago where I was trying so hard to host mask required shows in London. I had one show where I made a sign, I bought masks, I did like a whole little speech at the beginning of the show, and not a single person put a mask on. And it was like the most humiliating thing. And also, I was like, wow, you really don't give a shit about me.
Yeah.
And so to have like a show for my album release where everyone was masked, where not only myself, but like people in attendance could be safe, it was really meaningful, especially given like a lot of the context of the album being around isolation and grief around the pandemic.
And that is a perfect segue for what I wanted to talk about in terms of the themes of the album. And I will talk about the back half of the album later, because I think that that heads off in this kind of beautiful, observant spirit. But the first, I'd say first, almost 2/3 of the album are gorgeous and beautiful and flourishing sonics with quite heavy lyrical material, quite deep lyrical material. And I wanted to talk to you kind of about using songwriting as potentially a way of alchemizing those feelings, or potential, like people say, like songwriting is my therapy. And it felt especially like on early songs like Lone Wolf, and I would even go so far as, of course, to say Sylvia's House, that these are really alchemizing that. How did you approach the concept of taking that kind of material into the public domain, knowing that they are so personal to you?
Yeah, it was a mix, and it kind of, I think I like looked at each song and questioned whether it was worth releasing. A song like Sylvia's House for me was about like deciding to release it was about like dispelling shame within myself, or just like I felt like if I finally like told my story through this song, that I could let go of all of the internalized shame and like feelings of secrecy that I had to hold around like my past around that song. And then in regards to the songs that were more about COVID, grief, isolation, that type of stuff, it felt quite natural, I guess, for me to release. One, because I know of so many people who would resonate. So in that way, it felt important. Secondly, I think when I was writing the songs, I guess I didn't know that they would be on the album. So kind of, as you said, it was like therapy for me, and was just a way for me to process. But I recall writing some of those songs, and at the time I was losing a lot of friends who didn't really understand where I was coming from. I felt gaslit, pathologized. You know the deal.
I do indeed.
Yeah, and I kind of felt like, okay, well, if I make this a song, like, these people are gonna have to listen to it. You know, because like I felt like I was constantly being shut down and closed out of conversations about my health, my grief, my frustrations. And so I was like, okay, well, if I write this, maybe they'll hear it and they'll have to listen to it.
I have had much the same feeling. It is interesting to me. I think a lot of the COVID conscious artists I know, including yourself, and we'll talk about Monster in a second, have used their artistic craft to try and it's less so that we're making songs about the experience, or we're making art about the experience of being COVID conscious. More so, almost, we are writing folk warnings. It feels like the approach we keep taking, or at least as far as I've noticed, is there is a sense that we are trying to find alternative ways of communicating, because just talking to people is not working. And so I had a short film called Listen, which was, a horror film with no dialogue that has to do with people ignoring a voice that they can't see. And it's about kind of willful ignorance. And that was my way of alchemizing almost my rage about not being able to tell people directly, hey, your actions are harming, disabling, killing people. And it's not that much of a struggle to just kind of make that leap and look after one another. And I felt the same with Monster, is that it felt to me like a folk warning, like a parable. And Also, the level of empathy that you are having within that, I could be that monster too, is a lot better than I would be about the subject matter.
You're like, I couldn't be that monster.
Yeah, it's just like, I know that I could be that monster too, but I find I can't even, I don't know how to say it. It has always been so crystal clear to me, the stakes. And it was a song. I'm so glad it is on the album. I'm so glad you released it. It is something, the kind of thing I can send to people. It is a communication. It feels like that. Talk to me kind of about the origins of that song, when you felt the impulse to write it, in the life cycle that has been kind of the pandemic so far. Was it earlier? Was it later on? That kind of thing. I'm fascinated by the entire thing.
Yeah, so I mean, at least the timeline of like writing the album, I wrote all of the songs within a 2-year period, so like 2023, 2024. So it was definitely kind of that weird transitional period of the pandemic where like people were slowly not taking precautions. I mean, I would say like around the time when I moved to London, a lot of people here in the Bay Area, I felt like were still masking in like some public spaces. And I got to London and it was like no one. And I kind of went through this like, whoa, what am I like out of my mind? Like, I feel like I'm living in a different reality. And I made a bunch of new friends who were not COVID conscious, were not masking, avoiding any illnesses. And so I felt like I was kind of in this in between area and had to like reckon with what path I was going to take. You know, was I going to do the whole like denial thing, even though I had this like consciousness around what was true? Or was I going to like double down and accept isolation and all the tough stuff that comes around with that choice? And so obviously I went that route and I was like, my values. Duh. Yeah. But being in that weird spot is kind of where Monster came from, was that feeling of like, whoa, I could have turned out like you, but I didn't.
Yeah.
That's kind of where that came from, specifically around my like friendships and relationships with people who I felt like would claim to be aligned in terms of values or care about disabled people or disability justice. And I just felt like there was a huge gap in terms of their like said values and what they were putting into practice. So yeah, the song kind of came from there and my frustrations around it, and I felt like I needed to express it somehow, somewhere.
It's a stunning, stunning song, and delivered in such a, I mean, monster is a judgmental word, but I was going to say in such a non-judgmental, or it feels like a very non-judgmental approach, but it is at the end of the day quite a stark warning. And I would encourage anybody that's listening to the podcast who's not listened to the album to listen to the whole album, first and foremost, but especially Monster is one of my favorites. Going back to kind of writing as therapy and lyrics as some form of ways of processing the past and experiences of maybe anger or shame, do you feel your feelings have evolved on the source material, all of it, across not just Monster, but any of the other songs? Are there any feelings that you feel this album has helped you process, or are these still things you think you are going to return to that well again?
Yeah, I think I'm certainly in a different place than when I wrote the songs. I definitely feel a lot more hopeful, strangely. I tend to be like quite a melancholy, existential person, but working through a lot of the songs and then getting feedback from people who I'm in community with did make me a lot more hopeful. So I feel like it's kind of strange to listen to them and remind myself of where I was when I wrote them, because I really was in a doom and gloom, dark place. And I still struggle with those things constantly. I'm like,
the Misty Mountain.
Mentally ill, don't worry. Like, so I still have a lot more source material for my next project, don't worry. But yeah, in some ways my relationship has changed. And some of that is like meeting people like you who are making awesome art, who still give a shit about the world. So in that way, I feel more hopeful and less like, yeah, less alone.
I would say in response, your album and your artistry has done exactly the same for me, like one to one, exactly the same for me. It's the reason I wanted to interview you. Is it's been like, as I'm sure you know, a very, very lonely 7 years for a lot of us, and to have art that reflects that experience back to me has been like unquantifiably reassuring, and providing like a different level of a sense of, yeah, hope. And in increasingly hopeless times, you know, as we're recording this, potentially yet another pandemic might be starting. And I know that there are so many things that I could focus on as being dark, but especially Misty Mountain has been quite literally a rock I've been clinging to. I'll be trying to end my day and going, oh my God, the world, the state of the world. And I'll go pick up the album. Pick up the album. And specifically, that's a perfect segue, because Love is a Garden and Spellbound especially are the ways that I reset at the end of my day. Those are such beautiful, 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 beautiful songs. If I have not picked up on something a bit more ironic about them, let me know, because I know we live in an irony core world right now, but they just feel so purely ecstatic about the really beautiful things in life that matter and that last. And so I wanted to ask what the inspiration was behind kind of especially the back bit of the album. I know about Christine, obviously, and we'll chat about that in a second, but Love is a Garden and Spellbound are my girls.
Yeah. Also, I love that you've like kind of picked up on the A side being darker and the B side being more hopeful.
I've listened to it a trillion times. I can't help. I'm inferring. And I'm glad that I wasn't making that up in my head.
No, that means a lot. Yeah, so those two songs, well, Love is a Garden, actually, I wrote. My mom came and visited me in London, and we got in a huge fight, and we were crying, and it was her last day, so she was like about to leave for the airport, and right after she left, I wrote that song just about how relationships change and that they're things we're constantly tending to. So that's kind of where that song came to be.
I love it. I love it. It's like, even though it has that kind of sense of it's not all roses and lilies, it is still just such a brilliant encapsulation of, yeah, what matters. Love is a garden. You look after it. Yeah.
Totally. It was one of those things where we were like yelling, crying, and then we were like, I love you. Bye. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So that's where that was born. And then Spellbound, I actually wrote around the same time I wrote Christine, which is about my godmother who passed. And I think it was like maybe a week or two prior to her passing, I kind of knew that she was going to die. So I wrote that song just before then. And it really is just about like the interconnectedness of all things and all of us. And I feel like I was using a lot of circular imagery to kind of, yeah, portray that idea.
Yeah, it's a stunning song. The back half of the album, to me, it comes back. There's this sense that of the themes of the album being the kind of isolation, and then a reconnection with all things, a reconnection with love and the things that matter, even if they are difficult or even if they may seem distant. The ultimate poetry of this body of work, it can't be overstated. And so you finish, of course, as you mentioned, with an ode to your godmother, and that was gorgeous, and I don't have any question. I just want to say it made me cry. And my big quote from that, of course, is grief is a gift. It takes someone special to be missed like this. And it reminds me kind of a lot of the conversation people have had about grief in the past couple of years, around how grief is like a feeling that persists. It's all the love you couldn't give the person that has passed. And I think especially the past 7 years, and certainly in the past couple of years, it has been really difficult for a lot of people to process grief or even acknowledge grief. And it feels apt to have that on the album. I guess, and this is now me asking artists to speak for humanity, so
Oh,
forgive. But in terms of processing grief in the past 7 years, is there anything you feel you've learned about how to acknowledge these things and come to peace with these things?
I mean, I've just constantly reminded myself that I'm not alone. I mean, even like if I'm alone in a physical sense, I'm not alone more broadly. And I think like I don't know, I guess I've reshaped or reconceptualized my grief in a particular way of like this is worth it, I guess. Like I don't know, like I guess when I'm like in a lot of pain or like I'm processing and I'm isolated,
Mm,
um I remind myself that like the choices I've made that cuz like kind of like what I was saying around Monster, you know, like technically I could just drop
yeah.
all of this and like fake normal and do that whole thing, and I just remind myself that like the choices I'm making are like affirmations of my beliefs and that I'm living a life aligned with my values as best as I can, and that is worth the struggle.
Yes. Oh, I see
And
exactly what you mean.
yeah,
Yes.
so like
Yes.
in that way, when I'm like processing and I'm all down, I'm like, well, you know, I feel like I'd actually maybe feel worse about myself if I just denied myself the truth or like didn't face it
Yeah.
and ignored it. I don't know if that totally answers the question,
It does
but
indeed. No, it does. It answered definitely answered the question. I think that is an incredibly apt way of ending the interview. So those are one of my questions. Yeah, the idea of especially processing the grief around lost futures. I think a lot of people are dealing with that, and well, they're not dealing with that. They are going through it and not acknowledging that sense of lost futures, lost nows, lost connections, lost friendships, and even lost people, and they're kind of wanting, like we all meme about, back to normal, and I think further to that, I think people are wanting a utopia that never even existed before.
right.
No bad things happen.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, I think my take is quite a privileged one in that, like, I didn't have that level of isolation pre-pandemic. You know, like, some people have that lived experience
Yeah.
for far longer,
Yeah.
and that in some ways, like, I have the choice, you know,
I would
whereas
be
other
one of
people
those.
don't.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I was one of those people. I wasn't fully isolated before, but I wasn't. I will say that lockdown did not feel dissimilar to my daily life, right?
Hmm.
And I know that actually post the advent of COVID, I have had actually more opportunities and more chances to go out and be in the world and do more things than I did when I was in my teens due to illness.
Hmm.
And it is a very complex feeling of grief, because those years will never be the way that everybody else had them. And also now that I'm in the modern day potentially having that experience, I can't have the full experience, or I feel blocked from the full experience
Yeah.
because we're still dealing with a pandemic.
Hmm.
So it is that thing of just reassuring yourself of your values, that you're living in alignment with the things you believe, and also protecting the people and your community around you, because much like the back half of Misty Mountain, that is all we really have. All these other senses of FOMO or parties or whatever we might think that we want to be connected to, that all ends at 2 a.m. when you walk home and try and get fish and chips in from the shops or whatever. Like, it ends, that feeling ends, and it is something people chase every Friday night. But the people we love, our community, we only have them for a time. To protect them is part of loving them, and that's what lasts. And yeah, before I get any more sappy about the albums, I'm gonna stop. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for this piece of work. I recommend it to absolutely everyone in reach of my voice right now, including when we post this onto TikTok. Please go and stream Misty Mountain. Misty Mountain platinum in my household, number one global album of the year, Grammy Award nominated, Grammy Award winning. Thank you for your time. If you have any final things you'd like to say, let me know. Just where can people find you also?
Yes. Okay. People can find me on Instagram at
Woo!
Sophia Yau-Weeks. You can find my album on Bandcamp.
Let's go.
Same name on streaming platforms.
Nice,
You
nice,
know.
nice. The girl has a Substack, I believe.
Yes, I have a Substack.
Indeed.
Yes, it
Yes.
kind of is just my newsletter, but hey.
Nice. We love owned email lists for artists.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it. So Sophia's Substack, we'll put all of those in the description below. Thank you again for your time, Sophia. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for this album. Take care.